In this video, I will begin by explaining some exaggerated claims made by libertarian socialists, and end by offering a more realistic reinterpretation of anarchism that I think makes more sense in the light of current evidence. First, let me say that libertarian socialism is, in my view, still the most desirable of all the industrial social systems currently being proposed. And I think it offers more personal freedom and justice than the others. But as I will explain, even if broadly implemented, it could neither save humanity nor bring about a moral society. So the claims made by anarchism have been greatly exaggerated. First of all, Noam Chomsky, in his discussion with Foucault, said that it is important to know which impossible goals we're trying to achieve if we're trying to achieve some of the possible goals. And following this advice, if we were to rank goals, we would have to start delineating the most important ones, even if they were impossible. One of these seemingly impossible goals is to achieve a social system that provides long-term survival for the human species. And number two is achieving a social system that stops ecocide. Libertarian socialism, even if broadly implemented throughout the world, falls far short of achieving these two goals. Libertarian socialism does not oppose having billions of people on the planet, does not oppose material prosperity, or the massive worldwide use of land for agriculture. And since studies have shown that these are the main drivers of ecocide, libertarian socialism could not stop ecocide, but only reduce its severity by eliminating the excesses brought on by inequality. Now, have in mind that humanity was implementing ecocide even in pre-industrial society, albeit much more slowly. After all, the so-called Holocene extinction began with civilization itself. But it is industrialism that really took this ecocide to massively catastrophic levels. Every study shows that the main reasons for this are the population explosion happening as a result of the reduction in infant mortality and the industrialization of agriculture, which took over the habitat of countless other species. Of course, there are quite a few other practices that contribute to ecocide as well, from road networks to mining, introduction of invasive species, urbanization, pollution, overfishing, etc. But population and extensive agriculture are the most important factors of habitat destruction. The inequality seen in current industrial society, even if totally eliminated in our 7.4 billion people society, would only reduce ecocide to the level that was being implemented a few decades ago, when the Earth had about 5 billion people. That simply isn't good enough. As I said, the Holocene extinction was already happening in pre-industrial society, so it would be unreasonable to expect that even the most benign industrial society could really stop this process. The anarchist FAQ makes the incredible claim that once humans stop dominating each other, they will stop dominating the environment. This is as ludicrous as saying that once billionaires reach equality between themselves, they will treat the rest of us more nicely. Because it implies that humans will give up industrialism and agriculture, which is the only way to equitably share the environment with other animals. Libertarian socialism definitely does not want that. It wants to maintain the status of humanity as the boss of the natural world. In fact, it is kind of funny to watch libertarian socialists like Noam Chomsky talking about how much more productive and efficient workers' control is, or even the Spanish anarchist Buenaventura Durruti talking about how much better palaces and cities anarchists could build. So, in short, the goal of substantially reducing ecocide would require a massive reduction of both population and agricultural production, which is the only thing that historically, and especially prehistorically, has been able to provide long-term survival. But these goals are not even contemplated by libertarian socialists, which tells us straight away that Chomsky was not serious when he said that libertarian socialism was trying to know which impossible goals it should achieve. Of course, that is not to say that trying to undermine elite power and hierarchy in our current society are not worthy goals to pursue. But anarchists should not claim that these are some type of salvation for humanity, or some endless pursuit of moral improvement toward less authority. Here it is worth pointing out that the collective value of thousands upon thousands of species far surpasses that of humanity itself. So therefore, an ecocide is morally worse than any oppressive conditions or even genocide in history, which after all only kills a small percentage of the one species we call humanity. So even if libertarian socialism averted this oppression and mass killing of humans, or the extinction of humanity due to environmental degradation, it could not call itself moral if it implemented ecocide. This takes us to the question of the nature of anarchism or libertarian socialism and why it is that it has exaggerated its claims. For this, we have to look at history. Every industrial system that has been proposed, whether it's communism, free market capitalism, state capitalism, anarcho-syndicalism, social democracy, fascism, etc., are all ideologies of progress. They all claim to provide a framework in which human society does not stagnate, but rather improves towards some professed ideal. In other words, it does not seem unreasonable to call all of these industrial systems utopian. For most of human time on the planet, Homo sapiens lived in very static, non-progressive social structures, with a cultural ideology not based on improving towards some professed ideal, but rather based on the creation and maintenance of religious myths that would provide a strong sense of purpose, of meaning, and of enormous personal importance. Hunter-gatherers really believed they had cosmic importance and immortality, which they also attributed to other species and even things like rocks, the wind, etc., etc. The whole world was endowed with spiritual qualities. In other words, their sense of personal importance and meaning is not gotten so much from earthly importance, from belonging to a nation state, or from having a lot of money or power over other humans, or from artistic or scientific achievement, or from contributing to the moral or technological progress of their society. No, it is the constant interaction with the spirit world, with the cosmic importance that that entails, that keeps them fundamentally satisfied. And it is this satisfaction that allows them to place less emphasis on the earthly importance that could otherwise be gotten from things like nationalism, money, progress, art, etc. This static state of affairs casts doubt on the classical anarchist conception of humans satisfying their deepest natural desires by sharing the means of production and inquiring and creating into various related projects, or by some ad infinitum discovery and reduction of authority. In other words, what the prehistoric record shows, backed by 30 years of terror management theory, is that the deepest need of humanity is not to be free to inquire and to create in some materially plentiful progressive reality, but rather to be free from the unconscious fear of animal insignificance and death that we acquired when Homo sapiens got a bigger brain and became self-aware. So the first question we need to ask is it possible for humans to satisfactorily quell their unconscious fear of animal insignificance and death through anything other than a deep immersion in a spiritual reality? By the information we can gather from hunter-gatherer societies, the answer is no. A sense of earthly legacy only provides symbolic immortality and is less powerful than the literal immortality promised by religion. And the amount of personal importance one can accrue through earthly importance will always be, in general, less than that provided by cosmic importance. And it is precisely this dissatisfaction that is at the root of civilization and ultimately the ideology of progress. Humans did maintain spiritual or religious notions of reality after the invention of agriculture. They did maintain some measure of cosmic importance. However, the ratio of earthly to cosmic importance became more skewed toward earthly importance, with the obvious new emphasis on surplus, class societies, and status. Fast forward to the 17th century, and with the decline of religion, humans sought, in the emphasis on progress, a new way of finding meaning, personal importance, and a sense of legacy or symbolic immortality. Now, the question, as far as anarchism is concerned, is how does the sense of personal importance and legacy provided by anarchism compare to that provided by more hierarchical or authoritarian systems? This question was partially answered by the anarchist Mikhail Bakunin when he said that if you took the most ardent revolutionary, vested him in absolute power, within a year he would become worse than the Tsar himself. In saying this, he emphasized two fundamental facts. One, that power is so appealing that even the most ardent revolutionary would be unwilling to give it up. In other words, power, if accessible, is more alluring than an egalitarian share of material goods and earthly power. Number two, he admits to the dangers of the very existence of the material conditions that can lead to having power over large swaths of land and people. Here we can point how for hunter-gatherers, the very possibility of acquiring such vast power is simply impossible. In other words, their very material conditions prevent such an accumulation of power. And in contrast to the ardent revolutionary, a bushman of the Kalahari, for example, deeply immersed in his rituals of cosmic importance, seems much less likely to find a greater allure in the same earthly power, because the cosmic reality offers him more importance and immortality than even the most extreme of human earthly power. This fact also reinterprets the words of Rousseau, who said, "When I see multitudes of entirely naked savages scorn European voluptuousness and endure hunger, fire, the sword, and death to preserve only their independence, I feel that it does not behoove slaves to reason about freedom." The freedom most sought by these so-called savages is the freedom from their own anxiety about animal insignificance and death, which was gotten through their culture of cosmic importance, which leads, as a byproduct, to an additional freedom from bosses and kings, for the reasons mentioned earlier, namely that earthly importance and the subjection to it become more appealing only in the absence of the cosmic importance granted by their culture. The next question is, once the ratio of cosmic to earthly importance is skewed in favor of fundamentally unsatisfactory earthly importance, how do hierarchical systems compare to anti-hierarchical systems in the provision of self-importance and symbolic immortality? Well, it turns out that they do not do particularly well because, number one, concentration of power in the hands of the few becomes very alluring and very likely because it is the only thing that comes to approximate great cosmic importance. And number two, for the masses, the human need to belong to something of great importance and legacy is at least as easily satisfied through a vicarious, subordinate contribution to the elites representing this importance as it is from a contribution to an egalitarian revolutionary culture. If material wealth and the power derived from it provides an insufficient amount of self-importance to begin with, then the extra self-esteem gotten from sharing that material wealth doesn't make enough of a difference to counter the self-esteem gotten from the subordination to concentrations of power. To put it more simply, anarchism does not necessarily provide more self-esteem to its adherents than does fascism. The self-esteem of an average fascist need not be lower than the self-esteem of an average anarchist. Of course, at the same time, humans do have a very ancient sense of fairness and morality that can lead to a more egalitarian outcome. But according to terror management theory, this sense of fairness and morality was hijacked by our fear of death, and so it tends to function only in the context of cultural frameworks that exist primarily to provide personal importance and symbolic immortality. Ernest Becker described this phenomenon when he said, "Look how the girls blush, how hands reach out tremblingly, how eyes lower and dart to one side, how quickly a few choke up, ready for tearful and grateful submission, how smugly those nearest to the leaders smile, how puffed up they walk, how the devil himself seems to have contrived an instant mass puppet show with real-life creatures." When a person thinks of his own eager fascinations, he can feel revolted by himself and by the obedient throngs who look with such timidity and satisfaction on the leader. But if primitive man was not in bondage to the authority of living persons, he at least had some heroes somewhere, and these were the spirit powers, usually of the departed, dead, the ancestors. And what began in religion for them remains religious for us. Everything cultural is fabricated and given meaning by the mind, a meaning that was not given by physical nature. Culture, in this sense, is supernatural, and all systematizations of culture have in the end the same goal: to raise man above nature, to assure them that in some ways their lives count in the universe more than merely physical things count. The real world is simply too terrible to admit. It tells man that he's a small, trembling animal who will someday decay and die. Culture changes all this, makes man seem important, vital to the universe, immortal in some ways. Civilized society is a hopeful belief and protest that science, art, money, and goods make man count for more than any other animal. All power is sacred power, because it begins in the hunger for immortality and it ends in the absolute subjection to people and things which represent immortality power. If the emergence of social privilege marks the fall of man, the fall took place not in the transition from primitive communism to private property, but in the transition from ape to man. That is, from a type of animal that had no notion of the sacred to one that did. And if sacredness is embodied in persons, then they dominate by a psychological spell, not by physical coercion. Privilege is prestige, and prestige in its fundamental nature means deception and enchantment. In all this, Becker continues, I am not negating the pure Marxian side of historical domination. That is real enough, and we know it. But men are literally hypnotized by life and by those who represent life to them. Marxism, and I would say anarchism as well, has to come to grips with the conservative argument that there is something in human nature that invites inequality no matter what we do. People fashion unfreedom as a bribe for self-perpetuation. End quote.